morning everyone. Last class we have seen the eustachian tube anatomy. In this class, if any abnormality or any functional, you know, if anything happens to surroundings of the eustachian tube, or if eustachian tube doesn't work properly, what happens and what is the importance of eustachian tube? It doesn't work properly, what happens? All this you can see in this class. Before that, I'm Dr. Azmat, Department of ENT, CAMS RC. Good morning, one and all. So, I'll start with a brief, continuation with that last class. Embryology, if you come to embryology, the only one sentence you should remember that the tube develops from tubotympanic recess. The tubotympanic recess, it derives from the first pharyngeal pouch. It is a number of times they asked in the exam from where the eustachian tube will develop. So it is first pharyngeal pouch, from where the eustachian tube will develop. And the distal part of the pouch, it expands and it forms the middle ear, but the proximal part, it forms the eustachian tube. Obviously the proximal one it forms as it is anteriorly there, so that's why it makes into eustachian tube. The posterior one, it will go into the middle ear cavity, right? So, and the cartilage develops from the mesoderm. So this is n number of times they have asked in the exam. If you can see this here, if you can follow this diagram, in first diagram you have first pharyngeal pouch, tubotympanic recess, the otherwise called the tubotympanic recess. The proximal part converts into eustachian tube, the distal part converts into middle ear cavity, right? And the tubotympanic recess is from first pharyngeal pouch. This is a very, very important MCQ. You have to remember it till your exams, right? So if we start with again one more time with anatomy. So it is 36 mm long, and it has bony end and the cartilaginous part. The cartilaginous part is towards the nose, that is anterior-medial, and the bony part is towards the ear, that is posterior-lateral. And in between these two there is a small constriction that is called as isthmus. And obviously the cartilaginous part is long and bony part is short, but at the time of birth the bony part is long and the cartilaginous part is very small, and obviously with the age it changes. And if you come to the proper cross section, on the lateral side you have a cartilage, full cartilage, and medial side you have deficiency, and here you have Ostermann pad of fat which protects the eustachian tube. And you have one more important muscle, the tensor palati. The tensor palatile nerve supply is by mandibular nerve. It is asked n number of times in MCQ exams. And you have another muscle, that is levator palati. And in between these, the eustachian tube is there, which opens during a certain period, certain time. I will tell you what it is. And the lining epithelium is pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. And the eustachian tube is supplied by ascending pharyngeal and middle meningeal artery. Middle meningeal artery is a branch of maxillary artery, and venous drainage is by pterygoid and pharyngeal venous plexus, and lymphatic supply is by retropharyngeal node. Okay, the four muscles which are very, very important, that is levator palati, tensor palati, salpingopharyngeus, and tensor tympani. The levator palati, it is from petrous bone and to carotid sheath. Tensor palati, it is from it is also from the skull base. Salpingopharyngeus, it is from tube to pharyngeal muscles, and tensor tympani, it is there in the middle ear. These are four muscles which useful for functioning of the eustachian. The nerve supply of the tubal mucosa is by tympanic branch of cranial nerve, that is ninth cranial nerve, that is glosopharyngeal, and the tensor tympani is by mandibular branch, and levator palatine salpingopharyngeal is by pharyngeal plexus. So when you see via the endoscope, the medial end is, it forms the tubal elevation, that is called as teres tubaris. You can see in this picture the above cartilage, the above on the eustachian tube is called as teres tubaris. Okay, and the lymphoid tissue, whichever the tubal tonsil is called as Gerlach tonsil. The Gerlach tonsil is a tubal tonsil, palatine tonsil, nasopharyngeal, the same 1, 2, 3, 4. They used to ask in a MCQ exam. The lymphoid collection over the teres tubaris is called as Gerlach tonsil. This is very important MCQ. Here the point of interest. What is fossa of Rosenmuller? The posterior superior part of the torus is called as fossa of Rosenmuller. Why it is very important means the nasopharyngeal carcinoma, whichever what is there, the nasopharyngeal carcinoma, it starts from the fossa of Rosenmuller. So that's why whenever a patient comes to you with a neck node, or whenever a patient comes to you elder with a otitis media with a fusion, you should examine the fossa of Rosenmuller. So you should not miss the mass in the nasopharynx. Okay, this is a point of interest here, and already we discussed in the last class. So the difference between adult and infant eustachian tube. In adults it is 36 mm, in infant it is 18, and angle is 45 degrees, and infant 10 degrees. The lumen is narrow in the adult and wider in infant. That's why the milk it regurgitates to the middle ear easily. And angulation at the isthmus is present for adult and absent in the infant. The cartilage is very rigid in the adult and very flaccid in the infant. And elastic recoil is very effective in the adult and ineffective in the infant. And Ostman pad of fat, which used for protection of the tube, it is more in adult and less in infant. And this is very important 2 marks question and 4 marks question they used to ask, and you have to write with these along with a diagram. So physiology, what is the function of the eustachian tube and when it opens? Okay, the bony part, obviously it always opens. The bony part never closes. Why? Because it is a bony. And fibrocartilaginous part, it always closed in the rest. Only it opens in case of swallowing, yawning, sneezing, and forceful inflation. These are important points. And when eustachian tube opens, the tensor tympani will tense and the tube will be opened. See this. And functions of the eustachian tube. Again, this is important. It is for ventilation and maintenance of the atmospheric pressure in the middle ear. It will maintain the middle ear. See, one point here I want to tell you, the middle ear is open only with the eustachian tube. In all other areas it is closed. Okay, and the maintaining of the middle ear, the atmospheric pressure is by through eustachian tube only. It is mandatory for the normal hearing. So the middle ear pressure, it should be equal to atmospheric pressure for the normal hearing. And drainage of the middle ear secretions into nasopharynx by mucociliary action. You have a conveyor belt which the cilia beats towards the nasal end, nasopharyngeal end, and you have a drainage of the whatever the secretions or bacteria. And the third one is protection of the middle ear. It protects from the secretions, the ascending of the or the secretions from the nasopharynx to ear end. And it may it also protects from the pressure fluctuations and loud sounds from the through the pharynx. See, this is the first diagram. It is for it shows the ventilation and second for is protection, and third is for last one is for drainage. So where the eustachian tube will have a problem means in a case of abnormal patency, it should not be opened always, and if we have a functional obstruction, it means any tumors or any other functional obstruction and inflammation and tumors or adenoids. In these cases, the eustachian tube will be dysfunction. So how you evaluate? You can't see directly how the tube is. So how you know? With the history, the patient will present to you with the fullness in the ear, that there is oral fullness and pain and discomfort in the ear and hearing loss and ringing sensation and giddiness. And how you evaluate? So these are the evaluation of the eustachian tube is very important for marks question. They used to it is evaluated by retracted tympanic membrane, middle ear effusion, pneumatic otoscopy, post-nasal examination means nasopharyngeal examination, endoscopic examination of the nasopharynx, Valsalva maneuver, Toynbee test, Pulitzer test, sonotubometry. So if you see a retracted tympanic membrane, you should suspect that something is bad with eustachian tube. If you see middle ear effusion, the same, as the ciliary action of the eustachian tube is here impaired, that's why you will have a middle ear effusion, right? And or sometimes there may be a tumor or there may be a obstruction in the eustachian tube, that's why you will have a fluid in the eustachian tube. And pneumatic otoscopy, you can see the movement of the tympanic membrane. Normally, if you can blow the air into the eustachian tube back, or if you close your nose and if you swallow, the movement of the tympanic membrane you can appreciate very well in the tympanic membrane. But I mean, you can pick up by a pneumatic otoscopy, or sometimes you can manually give a pressure to the external artery canal. You can examine whether the eustachian tube is moving or not. Normally it is moving. In case of eustachian tube abnormality, the tympanic membrane won't move. Why? Because there is obstruction, right? And you can see with the post-nasal examination, right, like posterior rhinoscopy, and you can do with the endoscopic examination. Endoscopic examination is very popular. I will explain how to do. And Valsalva maneuver and all these tests I will explain here. So test for eustachian tube. The first one is Valsalva maneuver. Valsalva maneuver, the principle is positive pressures in the nasopharynx causes air to enter into eustachian tube. Means if you can push the air into the, if you try to push the air into eustachian tube, the movement of the tympanic membrane you can see via the otoscope. Okay, one of you take the otoscope and you see your friend's tympanic membrane, observe it while he is having air insufficiency. Okay, so this is a very simple test. If the tympanic membrane won't move, it means that there is a dysfunction of the eustachian tube. Okay. In a case of tympanic membrane perforation, you will hear a hissing sound. That air will come out to the perforation. And if you see a discharge in the middle ear, you will have a cracking sound. Like discharge will come out. Okay. And where the contraindication, where you should not do the test is in a case of atrophic scars or thin tympanic membrane. If you insuffle with the air, the tympanic membrane will rupture. And if you have an infection of the nose and nasopharynx, if you do this test, you will voluntarily push the infection into the middle ear. So don't do that. And one more test is Pulitzer test. What is Pulitzer test? So it is done on children who are unable to perform Valsalva maneuver. Okay, what is Pulitzer? Pulitzer is a olive shaped tip of the Pulitzer bag. It is a, I mean, bag of air. The Pulitzer means. So it has a tip. You can see in the diagram here. So the tip, it is introduced into the patient's nostril on the side of where, I mean, which side you are testing. You just push it into that side and ask them to close the other nostril, and the bag is compressed. And if the patient is swallows or says ick ick ick, and you can see the hissing sound. Okay, right. And instead of Pulitzer, you can give a bag of balloon also. Okay, right. In simple words, the other words I will tell you. You give a sound. Okay, you give a sound to the you give some air to the nasopharyngeal end, and you can pick up through the tympanic membrane. Okay. And catheterization, in this test, first nose is anesthetized, and then you can give local anesthesia with lignocaine, and then a catheter is introduced. The tip of the catheter is, generally the bent. You can see in this picture, and it is passing along the floor of the nose till it reaches the nasopharynx. After it reaches the nasopharynx, it rotates to the 90 degrees towards the septum, and you should see whether you have reached up to the nasopharynx or not. Okay, and then it engages to the posterior border of the nasoseptum. After engaging, and then you turn to 180 degrees. Means first you check whether you are reached at the adequate length or not. First you check with the septum, posterior part of the septum. If you touch the septum, means you have reached the adequate place, the appropriate place, and then turn it to 180 degrees to the lateral side, and it means that the tip is exactly against to the tubal opening. And now for this, the Pulitzer bag is connected and the air is inflated. Okay, right. The entry of air into the middle ear, and you can see with the auscultation, or else you can see with otoscope. Okay, but the problem in this test is you can injure the eustachian tube, and sometimes you may cause trauma to the nasal mucosa, which bleeds heavily, and sometimes you can transmit the nasopharyngeal infection into the middle ear, and sometimes there will be a rupture of the atrophic tympanic membrane also. The problems are also there. See, this is a procedure I have mentioned here, whatever the explained procedure. You can see in this picture, it is the curved end, the catheter. The catheter is generally engaged to septum. It means that you have reached the correct place, and then you turn to 180 degrees. Opposite to that, you have the nasopharyngeal end. And eustachian tube catheterization. Here, the air is pushed into eustachian tube catheter by squeezing the Pulitzer bag and examined by auscultation tube. Okay. So here, the blowing sound is normal, and bubbling sound is fluid, and whistling sound is partial eustachian block, and no sound means no. There is a obstruction of this. Okay, complication already we have discussed. And the Toynbee test is, till now we have discussed the positive pressure. Where you use the positive pressure, here you use the negative pressure. It means the patient is swallow while the nose is closed. You ask him to close the nose with fingers and ask him to swallow. So this draws the air from the middle ear into the nasopharynx and causes inward movement of the tympanic membrane. So here it draws air from the middle ear to the nasopharynx. So you can see the inward movement of the tympanic membrane. Okay. So, and you can verify the movement with the in otoscope or sometimes with a microscope also if you are in your OPD. So if the inward movement is there, it means that the tube is normally functioning. And one more test, that is tympanometry, or you can see the tympanometer in your audiology department. Here the positive and negative pressures, they are created by a external audiometer or tympanometer, and the pressure are given in the external canal and the external ear, and the patient is asked to swallow. If you have a perforated tympanic membrane or if you have an intact tympanic membrane, whichever pressure you have given, it will reflect back. If the perforation of the tympanic membrane is there, you cannot pick up those given pressures. And radiologically you can test with CT and MRI, and a saccharin methylene blue test is there. Here the saccharin test, where saccharin solution is given in the middle ear through a pre-existing perforation or a small syringe you can push into middle ear, and after the particular time, the pharynx, what they will do, the pharynx will, or the middle ear mucosa will throw that saccharin or methylene blue to the nasopharynx, to the pharynx. So the sweet taste of saccharin you will feel, or in case of methylene blue, you can see the blue color stain on the pharynx. So it means the tube is functioning properly. It is the ciliated columnar epithelium. It is functioning properly, and it is throwing that methylene blue or saccharin, whatever, to the nasopharynx. Generally, radiological tests. Here again, the radio opaque dye or a hypoic dye, which is instilled into the middle ear or through a pre-existing perforation or with the syringe, and the dye will come if the tube is patent. The dye will impart to the nasopharynx, and you can take a X-ray later on for the confirmation. Okay, so it is a contrast X-ray. And sonotubometry, one more test is there. Sonotubometry means here the tone is a tone, whatever the 500 Hz or 250 Hz tone. If you can give to the nose, and it is recording is taken from the external artery canal, the tone is heard when louder when the tube is very patent, and normally normal heads if the tube is normal functioning. Okay, so these are the tests and function tests of the tube. And so if we come to proper topic, the tubal blockage by means of anything like a inflammation or any tumor, adenoids, whatever. If the tube is blocked, then there is an absorption of the middle ear gases. So due to absorption of the middle ear gases, there will be negative pressure in the middle ear. Due to negative pressure in the middle ear, the tympanic membrane is sucked inside, so it is called as retraction of the tympanic membrane. Due to retraction of the tympanic membrane, the mucus cells or mucus glands in the middle ear, it secretes some fluid that is called as transudate, or sometimes you may have a hemorrhage also due to prolonged tubal block. So this transudate, you will call it as the thin watery fluid, you call it as otitis media with effusion. If the situation is continued with the OME, then it leads to atelectatic ear. Atelectasis means there is a, the tympanic membrane will go and will touch the promontory or to the medial wall of the middle ear completely. It will touch the middle ear, means there is a retraction. The tympanic membrane, pars flaccida and pars tensa, everything will be touched to, retracted to, medial wall of the middle ear. And this retraction pocket, if you can remember the theory of, Whitmack's theory of, formation of retraction pocket that leads to cholesteatoma. So it leads to cholesteatoma. and later on you will have a erosion of all the ossicles, especially incudostapedial joint. So this is the pathophysiology generally what happens. So symptoms, the patient will present to you with severe ear pain and hearing loss, popping sensation in the ear, ringing sensation in the ear, and disturbance of the equilibrium. When you examine the tympanic membrane, you will see a retracted tympanic membrane, congestion along the handle of the malleus and pars tensa, and you can see a middle ear fluid. The other day when I have shown you in otitis media with effusion, you can see the middle ear fluid. So in this picture you can see the tympanic membrane entirely wrapped over the medial wall of the middle ear, all up to the promontory. You can see very clearly the ossicles. And where in which conditions you will have a eustachian tube obstruction. In case of upper respiratory tract infections and allergy, sinusitis, nasal polyps, DNS means deviated nasal septum, hypertrophic adenoids and nasopharyngeal tumors, cleft palate, submucous cleft palate and Down syndrome. All these clinical causes they leads to eustachian tube obstruction. Adenoids, it causes mechanical obstruction of the tubal opening, and it acts as a active reservoir for the pathogens, and it releases the inflammatory mediators in allergy and causes tubal blockage. First, adenoid causes otitis media with effusion, or it may cause recurrent acute otitis media. If you can see in this endoscopic picture of the nasopharynx, there is a very huge grade 3, grade 4 adenoid hypertrophy that completely closing the lateral the eustachian tube opening, where in this case you will have a eustachian tubal blockade and the sequelae. So the better treatment for this in this case to remove the adenoid. And why cleft palate has tubal dysfunction means it is due to abnormality of the torus tubaris and the muscle tensor valli palati. It actually inserts into the particular area. So due to the abnormality of the palate, you will have muscular dysfunction. It leads to inefficient function of the tube. Okay, so that's why in a case of cleft palate, you will have very commonly you can see otitis media. And in case of Down syndrome, they don't have a proper muscle action. So the tone of the muscle is very less, poor tone, and there is abnormal shape of the nasopharynx which doesn't permit to work eustachian tube to properly function. And barotrauma, I'll explain you in a simple language. When you descend very rapidly in a aircraft, or if you do a underdiving, what happens, generally the middle ear pressure is equalized to atmospheric pressure by eustachian tube, and here the eustachian tube can't maintain the middle ear pressure. So when you descend very rapidly in flight, the atmospheric pressure is very high and middle ear pressure will be low, and eustachian tube will get locked, and there will be a negative pressure in the middle ear, and tympanic membrane retraction happens, and then followed by sometimes transudation and hemorrhage, and the sequelae it follows. So retraction pockets and eustachian tube, there are pars flaccida retractions and pars tensa retractions. Okay, you have grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4 retractions. Okay, and I want to tell you the grades here. Jacob Sade has classified the pars tensa into the pars tensa retractions into 4 categories. Grade 1 is slight retraction of the tympanic membrane over the annulus. Grade 2 is severe retraction and tympanic membrane touching to the long process of incus. Grade 3 is atelectasis, And grade 4 is adhesive otitis media. It means the tympanic membrane is completely touching to the promontory. And for pars flaccida retractions, grade 1 is a small attic dimple, grade 2 is pars flaccida retracted and wrapped over the neck of the malleus, grade 3 is erosion of sputum, grade 4 is deep retraction with unreachable accumulated keratin, and a severe, the sputum is lost everywhere and everything. So these are the uh, retraction pockets of the tympanic. And in the case of patellus eustachian tube, the eustachian tube orifice open always. So it can be idiopathic and in a case of if you lose your weight rapidly and pregnancy and multiple sclerosis, you can have a patellus eustachian tube. In this, you can hear your own voice at the same time, and you will have a double voice. Okay, and you can hear your own breath sounds. And pressure changes in the nasopharynx are easily transmitted to the middle ear, and every time your inspiration and expiration also you can hear in the middle ear, in your ear. And management, generally they are self-limiting, and weight gain and oral administration of potassium iodide will helpful. And sometimes in long standard cases you can give a what do you call, you insert a grommet. So examination of the eustachian tube, the pharyngeal end of the eustachian tube you can examine by posterior endoscopy, rigid endoscopy or nasopharyngoscopy, tympanic end by microscope and endoscope, and a simple examination is enough for retraction pockets and fluid. And movement of the tympanic membrane also you can examine. Okay, and for a detailed pathology, you need to do a nasal examination, endoscopy, allergic test, CT and MRI. Okay, so